Welcome to The Story. I'm Tim Gordon in for Pat Doris tonight, who is on vacation this week. Hey, before we get started, an important programming note for you. Starting Monday, The Story is changing time slots. So instead of coming to you live at 6 o'clock, we're going to move to 6:30 with The Story. David Molko and Laurel Porter will bring you KGW News at 6 during this time slot. Everything else that you love about The Story will stay exactly the same. But instead of 6 o'clock, again, find us at 6:30. Or if 6:30 doesn't work for you, well, you can watch us on any time at all on the KGW YouTube channel or our streaming service, KGW Plus. Again, this starts next Monday, July 31st. But let's get into tonight's show and an update that so many of you have been waiting for. We finally have a decision from Governor Tina Kotek on the pump your own gas bill. So you can bet that's our big story tonight. Yeah, Oregonians have had gas station attendants to pump their gas for them for over 70 years. It started back in 1951, but soon that will change. Today, Governor Tina Kotek declined to veto the Pump Your Own Gas bill, or House Bill 2426, meaning that she will either sign it into law herself or allow the bill to become law without her signature, something that is allowed in the state constitution. Once House Bill 2426 becomes law, whichever way it happens, that will leave New Jersey as the only state in the country where drivers are not supposed to pump their own gasoline. We know a lot of you have very strong opinions about this bill on either side of the issue. So let's pause for a moment and give you all the details you need to know, because soon it will be our reality. Okay, here goes. In the state's 16 more populated counties, stations could designate up to half of their pumps as self-service. They would need to keep at least one attendant on site to pump gas for customers who don't want to do it themselves. In Oregon's 20 other lesser populated counties, no attendant is required. With this, meaning stations could go fully self-service if they wanted to. Now, keep in mind, stations across the state have to charge the same price for the gas, whether you're pumping it yourself or having an attendant do it for you. If the governor signs it, it will go into effect immediately thanks to an emergency clause that is written into that bill. And if she doesn't, the bill will become law after the August 4th deadline set forth in the state constitution. Presumably, that would be then August 5th. So if you're not sure if you live in an urban or rural county, here's a quick list of what are considered the 20 rural counties in Oregon where an attendant would not be required. They are Baker, Clatsop, Crook, Curry, Gilliam, Grant, Harney, Hood River, Jefferson, Klamath, Lake, Malheur, Morrow, Sherman, Tillamook, Umatilla, Union, Wallowa, Wasco, and Wheeler. Boy, what a list. And if you didn't hear your county name in there, well, you're in one of the 16 urban counties where an attendant would have to be present at least for half of the pumps. The idea behind the differences in the rules for the bill was an effort to bridge the divide between the metro area and less populated areas of the state. At least that's according to two of the bill's chief sponsors in the Senate, one Democrat and one Republican. We interviewed them back in March after the bill passed the House. Take a listen to what they said about working together on something like this.
I really appreciate giving Oregonians opportunity to see Democrats and Republicans working together on issues. And I think this is one example of that, and out of many. And I just appreciate hearing all different perspectives, and that we see the issue and we come together and try to find a solution for that. So I've enjoyed this.
I think the bill really highlights that the rural-urban divide isn't always a negative thing, that sometimes it just means some extra consideration. I mean, the bill calls out 16 counties to do one thing and 20 counties to do another. And it's responsive to different parts of the state. I think, to Senator Sullivan's point, that ability for us to come together and work together and take into consideration what the local needs are is so important. And so, sometimes divide is good, and we can cater a piece of legislation to accommodate the local need.
Well, wouldn't it have been nice if that was the attitude about a month later during the legislative session? Of course, I'm referring to the Senate Republican walkout that became the longest in state history. But I digress. The biggest issues we've heard from those of you who are opposed to this bill are potential job losses and what it means for folks with disabilities. On the job loss part, lawmakers told us the labor shortage for gas station attendants was one of the big reasons they introduced this bill in the first place. Simply put, stations could not find enough people to pump the gas, leading to long wait times for drivers, or gas stations really having to close altogether because nobody was available to pump gas. And when it comes to people with disabilities, all gas stations still have to follow the Americans with Disabilities Act, requiring equal access for people who cannot pump it themselves. That means a gas station would have to help them fill up, whether with an attendant or even an employee working inside the store. Of course, what they should be doing and what they actually do could be different things, but the option will need to be available to them wherever they go to fill up. And we know you're already crafting an email to us that's either filled with elation or obscenities, but if not, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the pump your own gas bill. Yes, we would, and it becoming law. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. We would love to hear from you. Okay, it's been a few weeks now since Portland's daytime camping ban went into effect. If you've noticed a difference, well, let us know, but it'll likely be a while before we see big changes. The city says they're planning on spending quite a bit of time educating people about the new rules before they start enforcing them. They haven't told us, well, how long that'll be. Under the new rules, people aren't allowed to camp in public places between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., and they could face fines or jail time if they repeatedly don't comply. The ban is likely to face legal challenges, but we may be getting a preview of how that could play out based on what's going on now in a homeless camp in Bend. Oregon Public Broadcasting has been following this situation in Bend closely, and we think their coverage is worth your time. Here's the latest. A federal judge this week ruled that the city is allowed to continue with plans to clear a homeless camp. The camp is on Hunnell Road in Bend on the north end of the city. It's been growing for years now, and earlier this year, the city announced plans to clear it. That was set to begin earlier this month. But 3 people living in the camp went to court saying that clearing out the camp violates their constitutional rights. According to OPB, they were afraid of their property being stolen or taken and of being arrested if they didn't leave. Bend police put out a memo claiming that there were a high number of crimes around that camp and its surrounding businesses as well. And the city manager declared the camp a public health threat late last year. The people living in that camp who filed the lawsuit say they've made improvements to the conditions there. They also claim they had nowhere else to go. According to OPB, many people living in the camp live in RVs that are inoperable, so it's really impossible for them to move with their RVs somewhere else. They talked with one man who said he'd been living in his RV for 6 years and he doesn't know where he'll go if he has to move. But the judge didn't buy the campers' arguments. She ruled that the cleanup can continue, stating, quote, "It is in the public interest to regulate public streets in a way that could allow all to use the roads." That is District Court Judge Ann Eichen. Bend has its own camping ordinance. It's different from Portland's. It states that people camping on city property must move their sites every 24 hours, and there can only be 3 campsites per city block. The city told OPB they plan to resume the cleanup of the Hunnell Road camp right away, but some of the people living in that camp say they plan to resist leaving as long as possible. No, so you should go to check out OPB's coverage for more on this. They've got it all there for you. They've got several articles, in fact, on the Hunnell Road camp in Bend. Well, up next on the story, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office says this week they had their largest ever seizure of fentanyl. It has an estimated street value of over $300,000. But one of the items they found that helps make counterfeit pills is not technically illegal in Oregon. But that just changed in the state of Washington. Details on that, plus where the drugs were found, when the story returns. Welcome back. It is being hailed as the largest illegal fentanyl seizure in Multnomah County Sheriff's Office history. And take a look at your screen. You're looking at the results here. On Tuesday, deputies with the Special Investigations Unit were tailing a wanted person in the Goose Hollow neighborhood of Portland, Southwest 20th and Main Street to be exact, just a block away from Providence Park. For reference, they took the person into custody that they were tailing and got a search warrant for their car and their apartment. That's where they found this huge haul, gallon-sized plastic bags with fentanyl pills and powder, scales, a manual pill press, a commercial-grade pill press, thousands in cash, and a stolen handgun. The sheriff's office tells us the bags had around 58,000 pills, along with 16 pounds of fentanyl powder, much of it ready to be pressed into pills. Now, deputies estimate that between the pills and the powder, they kept around 138,000 pills off the streets. They tell us the street value is between $320,000 and $400,000. The suspect they arrested is not being identified yet as their investigation continues. Now, for context, the second largest fentanyl seizure by the sheriff's office was last year. That's when they found 92,000 pills during a coordinated traffic stop in Clackamas County. And there's, only so many times we can warn you about the dangers of fentanyl. It is just so deadly, with the DEA saying just 2 milligrams of the drug can cause a fatal overdose. But check out this stat. The feds say 60% of fentanyl pills tested by the DEA contain a potentially lethal dose. 6 in every 10. Stay away from it. And you may have noticed the pill presses that investigators found here in Portland, those are not illegal in the state of Oregon, but as of this past Sunday, the private use of pill presses is illegal in the state of Washington. The Evergreen State joined Mississippi and British Columbia as the only jurisdictions to ban the private use of those devices. Surprisingly, that few. Well, Governor Jay Inslee signed the Tyler Lee Yates Act back in April, prohibiting the purchase, sale, and possession of pill presses in Washington. It is now a Class C felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison and $10,000 in fines. It was named after a 31-year-old man who died from an overdose after he took what he believed was a legitimate OxyContin pill, but it turned out to be a counterfeit fentanyl pill that took his life. The bill passed both chambers of the Washington legislature unanimously this past session. Lawmakers believe the law can be another tool for law enforcement to target people creating and distributing fake fentanyl pills. Something else. Now to some lighter news here. There's a new license plate coming to Oregon's roads later on this year, and it's dedicated to bees. But it's the story behind the plate and the 16-year-old who designed it that got environmental reporter Cale Williams' attention.
This is more of a fall, late summer flower, and we have a lot of really small bees called mass bees and little sweat bees.
That's Merrick Stanton.
Since I was really little, I've always been interested in animals in general. But in about 7th grade, I took a really deep dive into bees.
And when he says a deep dive, he means it.
And I would read a book, I'd find the person who wrote the book or someone else to mention, and then I would email them my questions about, this, and such. In the book, I didn't understand why is it this way.
That curiosity led him to get involved with the Oregon Bee Atlas, a program out of Oregon State that trains volunteers to collect and identify the fuzzy pollinators. Andoni Melithopoulos, resident bee expert at OSU, was leading the training.
I met him on Zoom during the pandemic, and his camera was off, and I could have sworn by the sophistication of his question, he must have been 65 or 70.
And when he turned his camera on?
Unbelievable. How is that possible?
But Stanton is more than just a self-taught bee expert.
I mean, his capacity as both an artist, as a natural historian, as a person who just knows about the world is remarkable. As one of my colleagues says, he kind of represents the best of all of us.
Since I can remember, it's always been animals and art and nature. So drawing throughout my whole life and painting and whatever I can get my hands on.
After the training class, Stan did what he always does, creating custom thank you cards graced with his artwork.
He would send watercolors of work that he was doing, and he sent me a graphic novel of a very kind of wonderful wild bee and its life history. And we were thinking about the plate, who would design the plate?
Stanton jumped at the chance, and despite competition from professional graphic designers and artists, his art was chosen as Oregon's newest license plate.
So we have the bumblebees kind of representing the Oregon Bee Atlas net. Some of the money will go to that. And then also we have the Honeybee Project and also, I want to say, Clover.
Stanton also goes to a ton of events, doing what he can to teach others about the important role bees play in natural ecosystems and in agriculture.
It's important that people at least are aware of bees and are making changes, because we can know all about the bees and what's important, but if we have no action, it's not going to be of much use.
And he practices what he preaches at home, too.
So I've kind of taken control of our front yard.
Planting mostly native plants that are friendly to bees and other pollinators.
I have echinacea, or coneflower, some oregano, and also gumweed over here.
He said the prospect of seeing his art on cars all over the state is something that will take some getting used to, but
it is very exciting to have it be all over Oregon, also helping fund the project.
Wow, great job with that. That plate looks fantastic. If you want to get your hands on one of those new bee plates, they'll be available starting in November. They aren't free, of course. They'll run you $40 a pop, but $35 of that goes to support pollinator study programs. All right, still to come on the story. More than a decade ago, the ground literally shook as Seattle Seahawks fans erupted when Marshawn Lynch scored an incredible touchdown. The moment became known as the Beast Quake. But there's a new quake on the record books in Seattle, and it's all because of those Swifties, like my two daughters who were there. That's next when the story returns.
Coming up at 6:30, a Vancouver police officer charged with assault after a scuffle with a shoplifting suspect. A policing expert weighs in on what the body cam video reveals about the encounter. Plus, a Washington County judge rules on whether a teenager charged in the tragic death of 13-year-old Milana Lee will be tried as a juvenile or as an adult. And thousands of fentanyl pills and the materials to make even more are now off the streets. A look at the biggest ever fentanyl bust in Multnomah County. Those stories and more coming up next at 6:30.
Well, Pride Month is over, but people in the LGBTQ plus community and their allies say it's important to keep working for their rights, especially in light of the way things have been going over the last few years. According to the Human Rights Campaign, more than 75 anti-LGBTQ bills have been signed into law in various states this year, more than double last year, which had been the worst year on record then. The Human Rights Campaign issued its first ever state of emergency because of all that legislation. The FBI says there was a 70% increase in hate crimes against that community in 2021, the most recent data available. And the Department of Homeland Security has issued warnings about the potential for attacks on LGBTQ-friendly events. Well, tonight on Straight Talk, Ashley Corslin is talking with Basic Rights Oregon about what still needs to be done to protect LGBTQ plus rights in Oregon, especially for trans people.
I think we can see pretty clearly that it is a wedge issue. I think there's definitely room for education. I think, back when gay marriage wasn't legal yet, the tipping point was more people realizing that they knew an out gay person in their life. That's when they were more likely to be accepting of gay marriage and gay couples. And I think that trans folks can have a similar trajectory. I think as we become more visible, yes, there's going to be a backlash from people who don't understand, but if we can get education out there and people talking openly, I think
humanizing people
exactly
really is what it's about.
Yeah, I think it can be a winning issue eventually.
So both of you have mentioned Oregon specifically being a little more friendly to LGBTQ plus folks, especially when it comes to policy, lawmakers, that sort of thing in general. Have you heard from people moving to Oregon for those reasons? I mean, what are you hearing from them?
Yeah, definitely. We're aware anecdotally of a lot of folks moving to Oregon from other states, really over the last decade, but we've seen it kind of an increase in the last couple years as states, for example, in Texas, they said that parents could be, accused of child abuse just for supporting their trans children and getting them the medical care they need. And so people who have the means are certainly choosing to move here. We're also seeing lower income folks coming here because they want to be able to exist as a trans person and then still needing housing and all those things that everyone needs. And so that's another reason why Oregon really needs to, make sure it has sufficient housing for everyone.
Right, and on that note, let's talk about
Important discussion, and you can watch the entire conversation tonight on Straight Talk. It's at 7 here on KGW or anytime on our KGW YouTube channel or KGW Plus. All right, finally, Taylor Swift's highly anticipated Eras tour continues tonight down in California, but her shows last weekend in Seattle were seismic. And that's not just a wordplay. I mean that literally. Science proves it. And it might have some Seattle Seahawks fans kind of upset about a quake of their own being dethroned from a place of honor. Leah Pizzetti from our sister station King 5 explains.
Two very different crowds.
Say hi!
One very similar outcome, both have caused seismic activity thanks to their cheers. The first in 2011, when Marshawn Lynch's touchdown caused Seahawks fans to go wild. And now, when more than 70,000 Swifties filled Lumen Field.
Somebody posted and said, well, did the Taylor Swift concert make a beast quake? And I was like, oh, I am on that. That's fun.
So, Western Washington University geology professor Jackie Kaplan Auerbach plotted the seismic activity from last weekend's two concerts. And when she stacked the shaking on top of each other, it's clear they match, showing virtually the same set list was played each night. And from that data, she could see one key difference from the two nights.
I actually kind of, did math and saw, okay, to my data, it looks like it was delayed by 26 minutes. And somebody responded immediately, oh, yes, it was delayed by about a half an hour.
A fun part of this whole experiment, the citizen science element. She says the internet and several local teenagers have been a key part in collecting data, mostly in the form of screaming videos. So how do the two big events compare? Jackie points out there are differences. Taylor Swift had a slightly larger crowd and was directly on the field, plus the beat helps keep people in sync.
So I want to put that caveat out there because I don't really want to get into kind of a snickering match between Seahawks fans and Swifties. But I will say the Swifties have it in the bag. This was much bigger than the Beastquake in terms of raw amplitude of shaking. And it went on for a whole lot longer. Of course, the Beastquake was a moment in time. But thus far, the Swifties really have Seahawks fans beat.
But regardless of the outcome, she points out that this is a way to make science unique and entertaining.
If we can demystify what science is, I think it makes it much more accessible to everybody, and it makes it a more enjoyable aspect of our studies.
Leah Pizzetti, King 5 News.
Yeah, 72,000 fans, 2 nights in a row, and I heard it was fantastic. That's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. And before we go tonight, a reminder that starting Monday, The Story will be airing in a brand new time slot. Just a little later, find Pat and the team weeknights at 6:30 from now on. David Molko and Laurel Porter will bring you the news at 6 o'clock. If 6:30 doesn't work for you, but you still want to watch The Story, well, you can find full episodes on the KGW YouTube channel or our streaming service, KGW Plus. In the meantime, I'm Tim Gordon. Enjoy your weekend and have a great night.